Let's get some analysis now with political analyst Toby Vogel. He joins us from Brussels. Really good to have you with us, Toby. You're in Brussels there, not far from where you are. The European leaders are holding the so-called Emergency Defence Summit. We're hearing more and more talk of what sounds like a Cold War Mark II, talk of rearming Europe, for France saying that it's looking at potentially expanding its nuclear deterrent capabilities across the continent. How worried are you that we might be seeing the start of yet another Cold War?
Well, look, Oscar, one thing to worry about is the start of a new Cold War, which really has already, the early phase of that has already begun, has been underway for a few years now, with hybrid attacks by Russia in Western Europe, elsewhere. But let's not forget that at the same time as we have this hybrid war and this Cold War, if you will, there's also a very hot war being fought right now in Ukraine. So today's summit of European leaders really needs to do two things. It needs to reassure European citizens everywhere, including in Ukraine, that we are serious about thinking long-term strategically about how to address this situation, which is unprecedented for the European Union, certainly. And number two, much more concretely, that we got Ukraine's back. We're ready to step in. We have the cash to do so. We have the ammunition to do so. We have the political will to do so. That is really the twofold message that needs to come out of today's summit. If it doesn't, then it will just be yet another so-called wake-up call that remains empty promises.
Yes, and we know that soon after that disastrous meeting between Zelensky and Donald Trump in Washington, the Trump administration announced it was freezing all of its military support to Ukraine, but on top of that, it was freezing its intelligence sharing as well. Do you believe that Europe can step into the void and really fill that gap that the US has left behind?
I'm not really an intelligence expert, but it would seem to me to be very hard to fill that gap, certainly in the short run. Let's not forget that this is a problem that the European Union itself faces because it doesn't have its own intelligence service. This is all at the level of member states. Some of them are very good, but none of them are really have the capacity that American intelligence used to have before Trump started dismantling it.
And we know from Trump's point of view, he says he essentially wants to bring this 3-year conflict to an end. He says there's been enough loss of life on both sides. But now we have the Europeans talking about putting their boots on the ground in Ukraine, talk of France expanding their nuclear deterrence. It would seem that there is no appetite among European leaders to bring the conflict to an end. What is Europe's strategy here? Because should they put peacekeepers on the ground, I mean, that would take the Ukrainian conflict to a whole new level.
I would challenge this idea that the Europeans are not interested in peace. What they're not interested in is a quick fix solution of the kind that Trump seems to have in mind, that is unsustainable, that will allow Putin to rearm, to gather his forces and to reinvade as soon as he feels strong enough. And let's not forget, also threaten EU and NATO members in Central and Eastern Europe. So I think for the Europeans, it is very clear that nothing on Ukraine without Ukraine, nothing on Ukraine without Europe. Do they have a strategy? I think we're seeing the outlines of a strategy emerging now in these. We've had a number of summits, of meetings, a security summit at the weekend in London. There was a meeting in Paris of various EU member states and outside allies. So the contours of what such a sustainable peace might look like, I think, are slowly emerging. Whether there is the political will to actually see through any such strategy once it is fully articulated, that is an open question. But I do get the feeling very distinctly here in Brussels today that the national leaders assembling here today understand the seriousness of the situation. I don't feel that any of them think this is going to be an easy one for the EU and for wider, broader Europe to ride out.
Okay, Toby Vogel, we'll have to leave it there. Great to get your thoughts as always. Thank you.
Thanks so much.